Welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Premises. My name's Richard.
And my name is Romy, and thank you so much for joining us today. I do have a question for all of you. Who is the first person in your school every single morning? And when did anyone last ask how they're doing? Because Ofsted have just made that question a lot harder to ignore. And today we're going to talk about why. So let's just start with what's exactly new here. Staff wellbeing isn't exactly a fresh topic for schools, but something shifted in November, didn't it, Richard?
It did. So Ofsted now formally grades it, you see, Romy. So it sits within the leadership and governance evaluation on a 5-point scale with specific criteria at each level. And I'd say many schools still don't really realise this.
No, which is quite surprising, isn't it? Because the implications are pretty significant once you look at it closely.
They are. And, the framework's quite direct, actually, about what's good and what's poor and how that looks, So at one end, provision needs to be highly effective, comprehensive, timely, that kind of stuff. And at the other end, Romy, the language I'd say is equally blunt. It's things like, workload poorly managed or inappropriate and unsustainable.
And it's not just about having a policy on paper, is it? Inspectors are going to be looking for evidence that something actually changed as a result.
Yeah, exactly. Workload audits, survey results, action plans, because, not just signposting support, but demonstrating that the leaders have, monitored the picture and have responded to what they've actually found.
So here's where I think it gets interesting because most schools, when they think about wellbeing provision, are probably just thinking about their teaching staff, and that's obviously where the visible pressure is. It's where the formal structures have been built, and that's not necessarily wrong, is it?
No, it's not wrong at all. But Ofsted criteria, Romy, doesn't say just teaching staff, and that's the problem.
It says staff, full stop.
Yeah, that's it. And, that includes everyone. So like school business manager, for example, Romy, like 2026, most of them are now routinely carrying out other activities like finance, maybe even HR in some cases, like, of course, estates and compliance, or maybe send admin. And they're increasingly being pulled into, I don't know, things like sustainability and maybe even cybersecurity, it's things like that. So there's a school business leader wellbeing index that was published, you see. And what that said was that it found that workload pressure is still the number one challenge for that role. And I would say a big part of the problem is that probably that colleagues they just don't understand the breadth of what's in it.
And it does include the premises team as well, doesn't it? Which I think is the group that does get overlooked in these conversations the most.
Yeah, I'd actually say that. Yeah, because in fact, actually, I'd even say completely overlooked in some cases, Romy, because like when I'm speaking to site managers, clearly they're often the first one in the building, the first one out of the building. They work in parts, where most staff never even see, like plant rooms or roof spaces and service corridors or whatever. And I would say, work mainly alone most of the time, perhaps reporting to someone who might have limited understanding of what the job actually involves technically, no fault of their own, just that's just the case. And because there was this Unison survey as well around last November as well. And on that, what it said was, I think it was like 3,000 support staff for schools. 61% of the work was unpaid overtime, and that was like every week. So what's that, like nearly like 4 in 10 probably already looking for a better paid job elsewhere.
Yeah, and that's 61%. I think that's a massive number. And it isn't just a wellbeing concern. I think if your most experienced site manager walks out of the door, I'd say that the compliance program is most likely going to walk with them.
Yeah. And actually, that's the bit that I'd say doesn't get said enough. It's like asbestos management, statutory testing schedules, the contractor's oversight, fire safety records. That's probably not knowledge you can just hand over in a week. So a long-serving premises professional, they carry, institutional knowledge that I'd say is genuinely hard to replace so quickly.
Yeah, so what does this actually look like in practice then? Because I think the honest reaction from most school leaders is going to be, yep, it's a fair point, but it's just going to be another thing on an already impossible list of tasks they have to do.
Yeah, and I suppose that's completely understandable, isn't it? But I'd say none of this needs to be like some big program or something like that. To me, starting point is visibility. That's in my mind. And therefore, the most immediate question is whether your staff survey is actually reaching everyone. Have that check. All the site team getting it, the admin, catering? Because if it doesn't, then straight away you've got that structural gap in your evidence base that an inspector, I'd say, would spot pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think a survey that does miss half of the workforce, it can't really honestly claim to inform comprehensive provision, can it?
No. And the other thing I'd say also looking at whether the line management for the premises team is genuinely effective, but in terms of whether not just that it exists on paper, but whether the person who does those check-ins actually sort of understands the role well enough to therefore recognize when someone's under real pressure. Because I think there's a meaningful difference between just like a monthly calendar meeting, appointment with the staff, and an actual conversation about their workload or their isolation, things like that.
Yeah, and for the wellbeing action plan, which is one of the things inspectors look for, what does good look like there?
Detail, I'd say, like, a plan that names the site team, that references those actual interventions, however modest they are. It's just it's more defensible than a general statement that says and covers everyone saying everyone's fine, because the DfE's own workload and wellbeing platform has these templates, by the way, and I believe it applies across all staff roles, and that's pretty practical, isn't it? It's free, and I bet most schools aren't even using that as much as they could be.
No. So, Richard, if someone wanted to take away one thing from today, what would we hope that would be?
That I guess Ofsted didn't use the word comprehensive by accident. So if your wellbeing strategy was just built around one group of staff, that really isn't comprehensive. And yeah, now's the time.
Perfect. That's a great place to end it. Thanks everyone for watching. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like the post if you found it interesting. It's just the one quick and free thing you can do to help support us make this podcast and just help our channel grow.
Yes, thank you very much and see you next time.